Kevin is happy. That means we all can be happy. All right, hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So this talk is called Understanding Technical Leadership. This is a newer talk of mine, something I kind of threw together. This is dedicated to those that are in service. The whole point is really about service. Okay? During the talk, I present various experiences that I've had, things that I've learned, different concepts. It's kind of all over the place. And like any good Drupal community member, I took directly to Twitter to ask different folks for their own thoughts and feedback on the topic. So you will get some nice little tweets on the screen. My name is Bergstein. Otherwise, I go as Adam Bergstein. I am the Vice President of Engineering at Hook 42. We are a very, very awesome company, very cool spot, great people, and we do a ton of work in the community. Feel free to look us up or ask me if you have any questions, if you want to learn more about Hook 42 or anything. And I really appreciate being here. I'm very honored. I love this camp. It's a nice spot, so really like to be able to present. So before we get started on the topic at hand, I want to kind of just do a quick level set, a reminder. Events like this truly sustain the community that we are all a part of. It sustains it through innovation, through the exchange of ideas, the networking opportunities that we get to talk to one another and see each other in the flesh, right? These things are really, really critical. MidCamp is extremely critical. It is a vital part of the community. This year was a very clear reminder that events like this are not free. They come at a cost. This is a responsibility that we, as an entire community, need to be accountable for. So I want to thank all of the organizers, everyone who sponsored the event, and for the entire community who really stepped up to make sure that everyone could be here today. So thank you very much. So what's a little rough outline of what we're going to talk about? First, I want to start by asking a question, what is a technical leader? I want to begin there. The next thing, we'll review some different characteristics or traits or qualities might be better. And then we'll get into some lessons learned. That's going to be the fun part, probably. I'll do my best to give some relevant examples throughout, though. So what is a technical leader? What is it? I want to just state for the record, and from my own personal experience, firsthand, the best technical leaders are ones that they have experience, they fail, they have insight, but they're not necessarily the best technical person, right? You don't have to be technically brilliant to be an awesome leader, period. It's not a position, it's not a job title, it's a presence. It's a state of mind. Every single person is capable of being a leader, regardless of your role. It's who you are, it's what you do, right? So one of the things in this talk I wanted to share is this is a choice. The reason why I think I wanted to do this talk is I wanted to share how you could make that choice. You're able to use your experience in an effort to make the entire world better, not just, being super awesome technically, right? Every interaction that you have, every code review, every conversation, every co-working session, these are all day-to-day, minute-to-minute opportunities that you have to strut your stuff. First Twitter posting. Yeah. Matthew Donadio, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Just saw him in New Jersey. I think most tech leadership doesn't relate to the actual tech skills. It's being a good example while being in a technical role. There was a quote back from 1930. This is really even long before computing became a thing, so it's clearly relevant, right? The task of leadership is not to put greatness into humanity, but to elicit it, for the greatness is already there. I love that quote. I thought it was perfect. A leader is capable of bringing out the best in other people. You have to be selfless. You need to recognize the importance of just being a leader. You need to remove your ego, because at the end of the day, it's not about you. I like to consider my mission in the world is creating rock stars. That term has taken some weird turns in recent months. There was a couple blog posts that some pretty toxic stuff, but in general, I like to view my mission as making and creating rock stars. You need to empower others to be great. That is the function. You need to look at every single individual's strengths and weaknesses and then put them in a position to succeed. That, I think, is the real thing. Heather Rodriguez, former coworker of mine, a good technical leader makes team members feel comfortable asking questions and admitting they don't know something. Bless you. A good tech leader is a mentor and offers help and advice so others can grow too. Because if it's not about you, it should be about making sure other people are capable of getting to where they need to be. Mark Schwartz, has anybody heard of him? Oh yeah, dude's sharp. Really, really awesome dude. He's written 2 cool books. One of the books, and he's a new author actually. Both of his books just came out in the last couple of years. So Mark wrote a book called A Seat at the Table, and he really kind of positioned a whole new view on IT leadership. And this fresh new perspective really was around leadership and team empowerment, bridging things like Agile and DevOps and the actual service behind it. And it's phenomenal. Both of his books are really, really great. But there's a couple key points that are very relevant to this talk. The first one to acknowledge is that all grassroots innovation comes up through your team, right? That it can happen from any team member. It can happen from any rank, any position, any role. These people are the experts in what they do. They're the experts in the technology. They're the experts in the subject area. They are doing the work every single day, right? And it's extremely hard to project success. I think that's the thing he talks about a lot in the book is like, how do you measure this? How do you have data around this? But the one thing that he claims is it is the role of a technical leader or someone that's in a leadership position to incentivize the courage for the team members to bring and raise their ideas, to help harness that and nurture the ideas to grow and make the team stronger. Schwartz claims that it's not the role of IT leadership to command and control. That's a phrasing that he uses. But that is a pretty typical or pretty standard management style that sometimes people use in IT and in general. His position in the book is basically stating that you can harness all the ideas of the team, but you can proceed in a very methodical and calculated and cautious way by measuring progress, limiting big investments, and trying to prove different hypotheses that might exist. So that's a great way to harness ideas, but also to minimize risk, right? If the risk is quantified, you can avoid major mistakes, because even smaller risks can present major opportunities for people to grow and for the team to grow. So what's the old adage, right? Fail fast and experiment rapidly, right? He's leveraging that idea within leadership. So that sets the stage of what the basis in my mind is for a good technical leader. Why don't we talk a little bit about some characteristics. So there's some things that I've learned, both through observation and by participation and by screwing up a couple 100,000 times, because, you know, hey, I'm standing up here, but I'll tell you what, I think I've learned through hard knocks. Like, this is a a story from the trenches, not someone who does everything perfectly. And it feels a little weird, you know, giving a talk like this, but, you know, I just wanted to share some of these ideas, I guess. So, all right. Servant leadership. I feel like this is something that people are really starting to become and understand in the broader space. So your job really is to serve. It doesn't matter if you're in a leadership position or if you're an engineer or a QA person or a designer, anything like that. You're serving something or someone or a purpose. I think to demonstrate good leadership qualities, you have to understand what it is and who it is that you're actually serving. It starts there, right? You have to actually have that clarity. And you need to solve impactful and meaningful problems for those people, for your users or your customers or anything like that, right? So there's a whole space in UX and all this stuff about user personas and crafting experiences and user testing and all of this stuff, right? It's the exact same thing, but you take it up a level, right? You know, this applies to everything that we do in every role. You also may be in a position that instead of just serving a client or a customer or, you know, people that are viewing a website, you may also be representing a team. And that team could be technologists, it could be any people doing work. Your priority as a technical leader needs to be on serving all of those people. It's like a juggling act, right? But you need to understand it. Larry Spears had identified these 12 principles of servant leadership. I'm not going to get into all of them because, you know, probably could have a whole talk on all of these specific things, but I'll just read them. Listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, hey, that was a good one, foresight, stewardship, growth, building community, calling, and nurturing the spirit. This is pretty well-rounded, right? Embodying these principles can truly, in my mind, help technical leaders with situational awareness, right? If you look at framing your view of the world through these lenses, it could be a good way to grow or evolve. Steve Kinney on Twitter, you gotta love the Twitters, right? He stated, senior developers, unblocking and being a force multiplier to the junior developers on your team is literally the most important thing you can and should be doing with your time. If you're crushing code while members of your team are stuck, you're actively hurting the team. I agree. If you are serving other people, imagine how much impact that you are capable of having if you commit to bringing out the best in other people, not just yourself. As an example, I have found personally that it's always better to help coach people or co-work with them to help them produce the results that they want to have than it is for me to dive in and do the work and push the commit, right? In the past, I have pushed the commits for people. But, in stating, I'll handle this, I actually was reducing the opportunity for them to grow as individuals. Empathy. This was in the list, so I guess it's fair game. But I think this is probably the most important one, or one of them. So, we all need to acknowledge that every single person in this room and those that you interact with are all in some state of learning in their career and their journey. Doesn't matter what title they have. Some will have more knowledge about a certain area or have more knowledge in something versus another thing, and we're all different, right? We're bringing all these unique perspectives constantly. But one thing that I've learned is that when people make mistakes, they often didn't want to. That wasn't like their intent. Like I've never really seen someone wake up and say, I want to screw up royally today, right? So let's look at some practical examples. Someone might misunderstand the requirements of a ticket. They might end up developing the wrong solution because of that. These are all coachable things, and these things happen all the time, right? As leaders and in the space, we have to be promoting empathy. We need to focus on these opportunities as teaching moments. We need to allow people to fail. That's like a big thing for me, is letting things happen, giving the keynote Chris talked about safe spaces, or like the trapeze safety nets. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It's kind of the same idea, right? People need to have opportunities that they are allowed to fail without feeling like they're going to get, major retribution or something, right? And when they fall down, it's all of our responsibilities to pick them back up, right? Because you were there once too. There's a concept called blameless retrospectives, and I think that that's a great tool for achieving shared understanding in situations when things go sideways. And they help to promote empathy. They allow people to talk and to share what happened, what their experience was, and that's a really good tool that you can use in your own day-to-day practice. Daniel Rose responded to my super Twitter thread, super amazing, awesome Twitter thread. Having patience and being able to empathize and mentor newer team members was his point about what a good technical leader does. Now, most of you have probably seen this diagram, and it is probably the least empathetic thing that we have that exists in the wild. You've all seen it. I've witnessed both empathy and a lack of empathy around code reviews. But at the end of the day, we need to treat other people the way that we want to be treated too. Engineers especially invest a lot of time into the work that they do. It's like a mental drain, and it's very, it's taxing. And they, the deliverables in their work, they've often overcome significant challenges and thought through problems and looked at different ways of doing things, right? And those might be known, those might even be unknown, but they're doing it naturally all the time. The code review is a chance to give feedback on that work. But it should maintain a tone, a very positive tone, good feedback, thank the person for the work that they've done, recognize their effort, acknowledge it. They probably did a lot. And if you treat the code review as an opportunity to help someone learn from you, it has a whole new perspective, right? It's an opportunity. And then allow things to iterate and move on to the next problem. So if you're doing things right, you're really trying to facilitate an environment where there is continuous learning. There should be constant flow of information and growth and help and support for one another. You should always be learning, and you should be an advocate for making sure others are learning too. As technical leaders, I think it's pretty critical to contribute everything that you learn in some way, shape, or form. I write blog posts. I give demonstrations to my team or other people when they need it. I give presentations at camps and conferences. Fancy that. Funny side story, I learned that one of my blog posts has now taken a term called the Bergstein method for doing component-based design. That was hilarious, by the way. So you could see these things actually do have a way of trickling to people. They have impact. I was astonished, but they do, right? Allowing people, not just yourself, right, because it's not about your ego, to share their learnings with others. There needs to be a pipeline for the entire team to share their feedback and grow and share information. This is often what's called a retrospective in like the Agile frameworks, right? That if you have these types of things, that's that activity. It's reflection, right? Opening up for everyone to talk and share. One thing I found that's actually really difficult is both giving and receiving feedback. It can be brutal, right? But it's necessary. These are the things that are really important for making sure that people learn and grow. And I think if you commit to teaching and empathy, these things help with that, but it's still really hard, right? Everyone has a responsibility to do this, though, in my opinion. This is not just reserved for someone who's in charge of a team. You should be comfortable giving your peers feedback. And that's how they grow. That's how you can coach them. They can coach you. Open up those lines of communication. Be comfortable with that. They're doing it because they care. So I'll give you a silly example. And this is like the famous thing. A team member was giving a demonstration, and it was a live demo, right? I love live demos. They never work. On top of the fact that the live demo failed miserably because the internet went out or something happened, they also forgot to turn off Slack notifications, and so they were sharing their screen and oh hey, how was that tequila you had last night? Oh. Crap. And it was scramble, 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 and not very professional, not super classy. So, these things happen though. You only make that mistake once, right? So Sheldon on the other hand. But after the demo, hey, we got together, we held a little mini retrospective and we discussed it, and we actually went back and then we updated our handbook hey, please don't discuss tequila during client calls. Turn off your notifications. This is easy to do. Feedback went to the entire team. Hopefully others got it. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. So I've now used this quote in probably 4 of my last talks now because I've found it to just be so relevant. And that's Robert F. Kennedy. Some people are afraid of failure. They're afraid of it. It's freaks them out, right? And there's good reason, right? So failure can jeopardize super high profits or can introduce risk to projects and make people crabby and unhappy, right? But let's just face it. Let's ground ourselves collectively. Failure is going to happen naturally, regardless of how hard we try to avoid it. Let's just embrace it. It is the most critical mechanism for learning. It has the most impact on you, right? It's especially the big failures. Like, wow, it's a grounding moment. This helps people to achieve great things now or into the future. You need to support that. And maybe you don't fail. Maybe you actually end up crushing it and you just cured cancer or something crazy, right? So there's in Agile, I'm a big Agile advocate. I believe in it as like a framework. I think it's important. Leaders need to be comfortable sharing these things that they've learned, and people need to be comfortable sharing things that they've learned as well. There needs to be a good open forum. We talk about trying to spread knowledge throughout the organization, right? So in my experience, Agile ceremonies are a great way to make sure that these things happen fairly regularly and the lines of communication are open. And Agile is really based on iteration, right? So it's not doing this, sharing one time. It's actually doing it every couple weeks or maybe once a month, right? And trying to learn over time and continually improve. I believe very firmly that a good Agile practice should be open to the entire team. It's not just for certain members to participate. Like, every single person needs a seat at the table. Everyone needs to participate openly and authentically and blamelessly, as I talked about previously. But it really, things like retrospectives give people a great chance to collaborate and share, and they're facilitated conversations that are around brainstorming improvements, right? Like, what was your experience? Oh, it took me 50 minutes to run the automated testing stack on my project. Well, okay, so why don't we cut that down to a monthly scan and let's do targeted testing then? Ah, perfect. Everyone's happy. The iteration is the key part, right? Because the learning doesn't just happen one time. It happens forever. It happens as long as you're working with people. You need to do it ongoing. The other great thing, especially for managee people, super managee-er people, is you can actually reduce institutional knowledge if you're more open about things. Yeah, who's ever heard of tribal knowledge, right? So, you have this amazing rock star person who does 50% of the work and they understand every part of the system, right? And you just dump everything on their plate and then they get hit by a bus. You kind of should avoid these sorts of things. Like, it's kind of important, right? So having these process to share and sort of like disperse things through the team and learn from one another, like that's really important. It also helps with hiring and bringing new people in and out of teams. So it's good with scale. The next point I want to discuss is around trust. I think trust is at the forefront of this conversation. George MacDonald has a quote that states, "To be trusted is a greater compliment than being loved." That's pretty cool. If your goal is to bring out the best in other people, you have to trust them, right? Great things can happen if people trust one another. Really, really great things. Like, I've seen it firsthand. But one of the things that people overlook, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I trust you. Here's a ticket, I trust you. Go handle the ticket," right? But it goes beyond that. It actually affects your relationship with that person, right? The relationships are the key part of your peers and your peers and everything, and so on, everyone up and down the chain. These relationships are the key, and they should never, never be brushed aside for short-term wins. So, as an example, we had a sprint planning meeting where, we all get together and say, okay, who's going to be dividing up the work and doing what bits and pieces? And a team member really wanted to take a task that they had no experience in. They were like, "Oh my God, I'm like super into this and I want that ticket." I'm like, okay. But from my perspective, I was seeing risk and I decided to assign the ticket to another person who was more capable. I'm like, I'm sorry, like this isn't the right time. You know, I have to make sure this sprint goes smoothly. This isn't the right opportunity. I later learned, though, that my team member thought that I didn't trust them. And I could have and probably should have given them the work and then been there at their side to help them learn, give them the support, and grow the skills that they needed to be better. Damien kind of hit on this a little bit, and Chris Urban, who's actually here, crazy dude. So yeah, Damien said, a good leader can let things go and delegate. My response was, I feel like trust is the key here. Chris Urban, my right-hand man. I feel like trust is the single most important thing here. I think he's right. Section 3, lessons learned. In this section, I try to share some more experiences or things that I feel like were just very impactful. All right, the first one is presence. I think I've used the word a few times already throughout the talk, but like, let's bring it home, right? What is it about presence? Well, first, if you're a technical leader or really a leader at all, recognize that people are probably looking up to you. Scary. Your presence is critical. Like, you need to maintain good presence. How does that happen? Well, first, you need to make sure that you communicate thoughtfully. Your communication has to be on point, right? And you need to recognize the differences in other people to both be empathetic and to make sure that you're communicating well with them, right? You have to maintain that presence. You have to be aware. I also think to be present, you need to maintain a vision. You have to have a vision. You have to project that vision. Good leaders will be able to take things that are happening in the world around them and make connections to a broader strategy that's based on that vision. And they need to have the presence to both demonstrate, acknowledge, and reflect that vision. It's critical. If you maintain a vision, others will naturally follow. It actually happens. Like, if you have a goal and people buy into that goal, they're right there by your side, supporting you. So, as a silly example, someone on my team wanted to do some professional development with React.js. And the person was sitting, you know, in a whole other project at the time, was totally disconnected. But I knew that that person wanted to do that. We had shared that during a feedback session, like a professional development session. And I was sitting there a couple weeks later, and we were planning work out for a new project. And I found out that we had some React work. And I'm like, oh, hey, there's this thing going on over here that I think you might want to be doing. I was able to make that connection, get her reassigned in another part of the team, and now she's rocking and rolling on something that she really cares and wants to do and helps her grow. If you didn't have that sort of presence, would you miss that opportunity? Maybe. The end result was we were able to invest in her. We bolstered her capabilities, not just for the short term, but in the future. And all it took was the recognition of how to make that happen. Carrie Fisher, awesome community member, also Hook 42 team member, yay. I recently wrote about cultivating positive company culture. I think it also applies to the leaders themselves. Enforcing work-life balance, making diversity a priority, being transparent and flexible, but most importantly, listening to people with respect. Every single one of those points are around your presence. Your actions and your awareness will reflect that. Fun book, The No Asshole Rule, talks about this, kind of cultural phenomenon and toxicity in the workplace, right? So if your presence is super important and people are looking up to you, whether you know that or not, as I said, I learned the hard way. So it's imperative that you as a leader do not promote or support toxicity. I have seen toxic environments and they are horrible. They rip teams apart. So Robert Sutton explores this phenomenon in the book, The No Asshole Rule. He shares a lot of thoughts on just how detrimental toxic behaviors can be within a business or a team. And I would submit that as a leader, you have a role in making sure that you promote a civilized workplace, even aside from your presence. There are good and bad ways, so instead of blaming others, which can create a divide and hinder trust, try to listen and empathize. Just do it, right? You might not agree, but listen, be supportive. One of the main things that I have found is always assuming good intentions first. It is so natural when something happens to say, "Oh God, Joe just screwed this thing up again. Oh." Well, and then, you go and you look and his dog died earlier that morning, right? Shit. So assume good intentions. People don't, try to do things all the time, right? And I would also submit that competition and getting ahead, which is talked a little bit about in this book, at someone else's expense is toxic. Watch out for it. So as leaders, how do you promote that? Well, your presence is critical. We talked about that. But you need to try to recognize and mediate toxicity when it occurs. Not later, not in the next annual review. No, now, right? In my experience, toxicity comes up everywhere. It can come up in client meetings, check-ins with people. It can happen while you're coding. It can happen on Slack. It can happen in ticket management systems. Seriously, people post stuff constantly everywhere. You need to be aware, right? Robert's claim in the book is toxicity is contagious. You got to put a stop to it. What do you stand for? The next part of some stuff is being informed, right? So it can be, I've found, that it can actually be very challenging to be informed if you're not, working on a project minute by minute. So in my role, I often oversee many projects. I could be looking at 5 or 6 different projects at any point in time. So I'm not following what's going on a second-by-second basis or the minutia of what is happening in the team. I just can't. I don't have enough time. That would be horrible. But being informed is really, really critical to making sure that you don't make any assumptions. So here's an easy example, right? So if one of your team members goes over on an estimate, or suppose they miss a deadline, talk to them. Get informed, right? Listen to what happened. It actually might shed some light into some disconnects that can be really easily fixed. Oh, hey, okay, in sprint planning, we're going to add this new field in here and we're going to fill this out while we're doing this so we don't have this issue moving forward. You help that person, you help the rest of the team and the rest of the process moving forward, right? I also like to have kind of weekly meetings to be informed with different project teams and different people that I'm working with. And I love to attend the sprint retrospectives. It's my favorite thing. I get to hear all the different experiences going on, what people are learning, and that's a good way to be informed, getting back to the agile stuff, right? For me personally, I've always tried to maintain an open door policy. I tell people they could ping me at any point in time, especially on Slack, whenever I'm needed. I might not always be free, but I always will become free, and I will always prioritize people as soon as I possibly can, and I want people to feel comfortable reaching out to me. I feel like that's really important. I also advocate for something called the 30-minute rule, because it's not just about me, it's also about making sure that people have the support that they need, right? So 30-minute rule is if you're blocked on something for more than 30 minutes, reach out to a peer, reach out to me, reach out to somebody else that's doing the work or can help you to make sure that you don't get stuck. So being informed is not really grandma's strengths. I love this meme. I had to find some way to just like sneak this in here. It's probably super awkward, but yeah. So she's not super informed about what memes are, but hey, that's okay. Being flexible. Technical leaders often have to take the responsibility for interacting with people, right? You need to own that responsibility. It's not about the other person, it's actually about you. I think it's really natural to say, oh, Joe, you know, so-and-so over here was just so mean today. It's like, well, okay, maybe I wasn't supportive enough. It's flipping the table, right? Who has that responsibility? You will interact with people that have varying degrees of skills. They'll have different backgrounds. I mean, like, I'm astonished, just, I have to do a quick aside, like, how many people in the Drupal community that I interact with and I work with have degrees in things that are like, you know, environmental studies and liberal arts. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Like, you know, that we can promote that kind of diversity, you know, in the community and backgrounds of people that come from everywhere internationally. It's awesome. But they're all, every person is bringing their own unique experience and their varying degrees of knowledge and experience that comes with that, right? Technically and interpersonally. So as a technical leader, I believe it requires you to be extremely flexible. You have to have excellent soft skills and situational awareness to tailor your communication to other people's needs, not yours. I also feel like you need to be able to demonstrate technical concepts in a non-technical way. I know that sounds really stupid and straightforward, but I just feel like it's important. Technical leaders need to understand that things come down to impact and risk and differences in opinion and trying to communicate things in a way that you can get shared understanding. So in my experience, one critical way to do that is actually visualizations. Like, visuals are so important. Words can be misunderstood, especially written words, right? You could write something and someone could totally misunderstand. Put a flow chart together. Like, it's so easy, it takes 5 minutes, and you could say, this is exactly what I'd like to see happen. I want this thing to go here, and this thing to go here, and this thing to go here. Here's a picture, right? Having that sort of thing is so useful because people like immediately resonate with that, right? And it could save you like 3 weeks of writing a spec document and just have it, you know, still be kind of crappy. Just saying. Haven't experienced that before. So understanding others and being flexible in how you interact with them is probably a very critical skill to have. One quote I always say is that no job is ever beneath you, right? If sweeping the floor is what needs to be done to make sure that things go really well within the team, all right, I'm sweeping the floor. It's cool. Don't stick to some fixed perspective about what you think a technical leader should be. Based on the situation and the people involved, you actually might find yourself working in tons of different areas. You should be comfortable performing any of the work because you're asking, or you might be asking, the rest of your team to do it. This helps to promote empathy and gives you a really good perspective on what people are dealing with. So recently, I ended up having to do a deployment for an engineer that was out sick in a given day. No big deal, right? But for months, I had been hearing about all these performance issues with these deployments. Like, oh, it takes forever. It's horrible. It's crappy. Once I was able to see it firsthand, oh my God, I like immediately recognized how how much of a lack of empathy I had for what the person was saying. They were saying it so nice and so calmly, like, oh yeah, this takes really a long time. And I'm like, oh, okay. Oh my God, this took me 4 hours to do. Holy crap, this just wasted my entire morning. Once I realized that and it hit me firsthand, what a different perspective I had, right? Evolution, evolve. I feel like I should have a statue, evolve. Yeah. Change is inevitable. It is. Everything changes. Technology changes, staff changes, businesses change, the world changes. All the time. Leaders need to be able to adapt to this change. You need to recognize that. And try not to promote FUD. Who knows what FUD is? Yep.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt.
There you go. As a leader, I guarantee you that during times of change, you will be looked up to provide a sense of stability and calm, because change is really hard on people. Very hard. But change is the end result of true learning. We talked about being a continuous learning organization, right? That's critical to succeeding. While change may be hard, it's a necessity. You have to do it. Technical leaders need to have the ability to adapt to this change. Your strategies, your vision, your communication, all of it needs to be change friendly. If you're trying to communicate something, you need to say, hey, this might change in a week, or I might be open to new ideas later, but right now, blah, 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 right? In my experience, though, the worst situations to deal with are the ones where changes occur very drastically, significantly, and suddenly. If you're making major changes, try to do so gradually. Try to listen to people's concerns so that they're heard and they're supported, and make sure that people are invested in the change. Bring them with you. So one example fairly recently is we were having a hard time in the team learning about specific subject area expertise, I should say. The team that I was working with is extremely cross-functional. Like, everyone can do everything. We're full stack engineers. I hate that word, term, multiple words. But we learned that for us to be successful, we needed to have and develop up our expertise with specific specialty areas, right? DevOps and design and coding and front-end craziness. Oh my God, the front-end craziness. So we learned that, and even though it was hard, we started very, very gradually having people align with a certain area based on their interest, and we started evolving those skills. Technical people love to assume that they only do technical things. Wrong. Every technical person should maintain some awareness of business factors, and especially one that is doing technical leadership. It's been my experience that as you evolve, one potential career path for a technical leader is to go closer into the business, which could include more money stuff or sales work or anything like that. That's one career path. But having awareness of business factors is a healthy thing to have across the board. I can tell you hands down that in my experience, if you are much more informed about the broader business landscape or the business factors of what you're dealing with a project, whether it's the budget or the needs of the business that you're trying to serve or anything like that, right? You are so much better at having the ability to make better situational decisions. You have much more awareness and can actually do things better. There might be times when you might have to cut corners on a project because you just don't have enough money. It might not be ideal, you know, and that stinks to say, but that's not the best technical solution. But you know you're doing it consciously. I see this all the time, especially when we write up contracts. So you might have a request. Someone might come in and the client might say, I really want this, but it's not in the contract. So what do? If you have good business awareness, you can, well, first you should make sure you read the contract, right? You should know that. You should pick up on it. But you might be asked to help brainstorm ideas. And those always have constraints. Like I only have $500 for that request, right? So having all of this stuff and maintaining good technical strategies is a great way to be a technical leader and have good business acumen. It's a strategic thing in my mind. This is kind of like the view of, you know, a salesman in my mind. Like, you know, kind of has this like swarmy, slimy kind of feel to it a little bit, right? But, you know, that's how I feel as a technical person. That's when I look at a sales guy and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want your used car, you know, it just looks like crap. But that's the wrong perception to have. Like, sales especially is a really critical part of the business. It's a part of business health, right? Like you need it, you know, if you're running a business. But you need to realize that as a technical leader, you actually have a real opportunity to influence what is sold. Think about it, right? Would you want someone to sell something that wasn't informed with any technical relevance? Pretty risky, right? Those activities can be incredibly beneficial to a team. They shouldn't be something that people just shy away from. They can mitigate risk. If you want to get me on my soapbox for a long time, this is probably how to do it. I am a huge proponent for pragmatism, okay? There will always and forever be a balance between technical sexiness and pragmatism. It's a balancing act. Many innovative new tools, they still need to be learned, they need to be explored, and they need to be matured. As a community, we have a responsibility to do that. That's actually why we're here, right? And we have to contribute back to Drupal to make sure that the innovation that we put into it is sustainable. But technical leaders must be able to recognize and balance this risk. They must be able to recognize that innovation is critical, but you can't do it to a degree that you are introducing such a massive risk to the work that you're doing. Why? Because you should be using the right tool for the right job. And sometimes the innovative things are not the right tool for that job. Barrett, one of my bros, love this guy. A good tech lead loves new tech, but approaches it with caution. A bad one loves it to abandon and goes all in too readily. I love that quote. It's perfect, right? How does that affect us today in the Drupal community? There's so many examples of this. I just gave a talk yesterday about components, like component-based design, right? This is a classic example of a really cool innovative tool. Brian Perry and I did a little very ad hoc presentation, thank you, Avi. And we talked about how as a community we've really struggled to get our hands around this innovation. How do you do it, right? And Brian used a term called like the immature years, right? Like of doing this type of work, and it's kind of true. But this is a perfect example where you have to balance innovation with, you know, pragmatism, right? Other examples that are very relevant probably to all of us today are decoupled Drupal and React. That's like such a big growing space. And all this Docker stuff, you know, these DDEV and Doxel and all these crazy tools that are coming out, Lando. We're still trying to figure all of that out. One of my favorite books is called The Pragmatic Programmer. It's kind of old, but it's like one of those kind of evergreen books, right? It just never gets old. I could read it over and over again, and I still learn from it. Pragmatism Pragmatism is really about sensibility and practicality. There's many different things that Andrew Hunt and David Thomas talk about in this book about delighting your users, right? Like understanding your audience. We've already talked about that. But one of the things that they talk about is software rot. Software rot is advocating for good architectural technological choices, right? As a technical leader, you should be promoting good technical choices when you can. Limit complexity. Promote simplicity. Make things easier. Don't write 1,000 lines of code when you could do something in 50. This helps solutions scale with time. It helps with the maintenance. It helps with the onboarding and the hit by a bus scenario, right? All of these things come right to the forefront. Good solutions will scale if they are pragmatic. Don't cut corners. Promote quality. That's another part of the book, right? There are ways that you can do that. They talk about automation and testing. Test ruthlessly and effectively. That's a quote that they pull, they mention all the time in the book. But cutting corners is the easiest way to piss people off. It always comes back to haunt you. Oh, I can get this done really, really quick right now, but I'm not going to do it this way, even though I know I should. Try to avoid that if you can. And quality is key. You have to have automation in place to be predictable. You have to have automated tests and really, really strong, good, thorough testing practices on your team. One thing that I've seen in my experience that has hurt pragmatism is when an individual person brings their own bias to the table. Like, I have to do this. This is I feel really important. But being pragmatic sometimes means that you have to put your own biases aside and do what's best for a broader purpose. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. That's by Howard Zinn. Remember that as a technical leader, you can look at every single interaction that you have as an opportunity for good. Imagine the impact that everyone in this room, and everyone at this camp, and everyone in Chicago, and everyone in the nation, and everyone in the globe is capable of having if we all made that commitment. Imagine it. It gives me goosebumps. I want to thank you all very, very much. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.